The year was 1991 and the new Super Nintendo had not been long on the market. There was one series that everyone had been looking forward to making the jump to the next generation, Castlevania. The first game had already become a classic on the previous Nintendo system. Konami wanted to quickly show how they can impress on the new hardware in order to maintain their amazing game portfolio. As was the normal for Konami in the 80s and early 90s, creators would go uncredited in the game. This was Konami's way to reduce the risk of other companies poaching talent. We now know that it was created by Masahiro Ueno and a small team including composers Masanori Adachi and Taro Kudo. This, for whatever reason, is not considered a remake but a reimagining of the original Castlevania. Therefore, the story is essentially the same. I've always been a secrets goth. I like the macabre, and the subject matter of the Castlevania series was very appealing to me. Vampires, universal monsters, candles, the music, ghosts, ghouls, Greek mythology, skeletons, spiders, and death himself. What's not to like? While watching YouTube gaming content, I discovered the game and I was very intrigued, but I was not a fan of retro games being so tough. In my youth, I owned a Sega Mega Drive, and so many of the games were not only very tough, but they had limited continues, therefore having to do repeat completed runs. I have come to the realization that this has put me off many difficult games, but with the release of the Super Nintendo Mini, I found the opportunity to give some of these really tough games a bash and utilize the system's save states. I soon discovered that the continues in this game are unlimited, and using a continue only means starting the level over, not the entire game. I have no idea why, but early Nintendo games considered very tough tend to have this feature. Therefore, it is this game that has opened me up to many other of my new favourites. This was my first experience with a Castlevania game, therefore at the time I didn't know any different, but now with a lot more knowledge of the series I can see why Castlevania traditionalists don't like some of the changes to the series with this game. The attacking action in the game is very different. It is very whip heavy. New features of the whip include multi-directional whipping, which I personally really enjoy. You feel in full control. You can jump and diagonally whip enemies. Diagonally up attack makes flying enemies much easier to deal with, and you can also attack preemptively from a lower platform, giving a slight strategy element to the game. The whip also can be used by having Simon just hold it out to be used like a shield or kill enemies below you. This makes the usual special items a lot less necessary. That being said, the more you use any sub-weapon increases the chance of finding a multiplier, which can make tough enemies and bosses a breeze. The usual stopwatch, cross, dagger, holy water and axe are all represented here. In my opinion, the cross is the most ideal weapon in the game, especially when multiplied. On the platforming side, Simon at times has to use the whip to swing across platforms, which is occasionally used in-game for some added variety to the platforming. I do feel that from a basic platforming sense that this game has a lot more going on than other Castlevania titles. Having to jump across giant chandeliers, making your way up a waterfall level, and floating platforms are plenty. Shall I mention the moonwalk? Hell yeah, Simon can moonwalk. Generally speaking, simply spamming bosses will get you quite far in this game, but towards the end more care and pattern recognition is needed. The music. What can I say that hasn't already been said about the music in any Castlevania title? This is stellar and completely makes this game. From the ominous intro to the hero's theme in the first level all the way through to the final battle with Dracula, this soundtrack is absolutely one of the best. It makes each stage ooze with atmosphere and also adds familiarity with remixes of the classic Castlevania tracks. It's so perfect that without it would be a huge detriment to this quality game. To me, it would be like Star Wars without John Williams' iconic soundtrack. Graphically, I honestly feel that the Super Nintendo will do better in years to come, but you have to bear in mind that this is a very early game for the console. In fact, the development of this game was taking place at a similar time to the predecessor on the original NES, Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse, with the usual Castlevania team working on 3 and a relatively new team working on 4. Many aspects of the graphics in Super Castlevania 4 show exactly what the console will be capable of in the future, such as adding real depth to the 2D with many background layers and multi-scrolling backgrounds. This game is also one of the first to show off the system's Mode 7 capabilities in a number of rotating room levels. Effects such as this do some fairly hefty slowdown, but it doesn't obstruct the gameplay too much. Tom Du Bois created the box art and is definitely worth a mention. He also created the art for Castlevania 3 on the NES, Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge on the Game Boy, and Castlevania Bloodlines on the Mega Drive. Super Castlevania 4 is probably the most accessible of the series, but I think that's one of the things I find best about it. This is a great place to start for a future Castlevania fan. The game is also available on the Wii, although the Virtual Console has now closed, the Wii U, 3DS, SNES Mini, PS4, Xbox, Windows and Switch via the Castlevania collection. I highly recommend this game for anyone to invest a little time in, and frankly the Castlevania series has been my single greatest discovery on my retro game journey. Fantastic games. I hope you've enjoyed this content and I'll catch you on the next one.